a pro lecture. So I have a live audience and I have audiences on several different platforms. So if you don't see, I will try to repeat the questions asked to me so everyone else doesn't get confused. All right, so for Prepare Like a Pro, I figured I would take a professional and see how they prepare for a chess game and try to explain it from the ground up, meaning from the very beginnings of the opening to later to how they think about the positions. And I'm using professional, which is no longer me. So I'm using Abhimanyu Mishra, one of the young talents. He recently had a really great success in the Grand Swiss, which took place in Uzbekistan, and is really one of the up-and-coming players in the US. He's actually about to play the US Championship right here at the club. So you guys don't want to miss that. He'll be a very exciting addition. So I wanted to discuss how you would approach these openings that he chooses and what you would do. So I would say that every player has their own way they like to prepare. I obviously cannot guess exactly how he prepares, but I want to talk about like how he starts and what the deal is. So one thing I think that a lot of club players get wrong is they start their preparation too late. What I mean by this is, let's say we take the starting game. So this was a game he played in the Grand Swiss against Yu Yangyi, a top Chinese grandmaster. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. So what I mean by start their preparation too late is they'll do something like this. Okay, knight takes, d6, knight f3 takes. This is all theory. Knight c3, they probably have to take. The pawn takes. They play bishop here. They're going to castle. I'm going to play bishop e3. I'm going to castle. And it's like, slow down. It's very important to understand where your moves come from and why before you go forward. I think a lot of people and players of this level have known this for so long they don't have to think about it as much. But for a lot of us, we have to kind of know where things come from. I don't have to discuss e4, e5 so much. Everyone's seen it. You're controlling the center. You're putting a pawn in the center. Everyone's happy. You know, we don't have to go too much farther. But already here, it's important to note the differences between knight f6 and knight c6, for example. So can anyone tell me, just very basically, the differences between knight f6 and knight c6?
Knight c6 protects the e5 pawn. We can't take on e5
Yep.
safely. Knight f6 offers to trade pawns.
Right. So the basic difference is knight c6 defends the pawn. So you're basically saying that instead of trying to counterattack, I'm simply defending the pawn, but I'm developing a piece. You can play a move like d6, of course, but what would be a potential drawback of d6?
Dark square bishop's blocked.
This dark square bishop is blocked, and therefore it's a little bit more annoying to develop. You would say it's a bit more passive. Of course, it's not a bad move, right? This is played, this is called the Philidor, but it's important to know where moves come from. So knight c6, and then usually white either develops the bishop to b5 for a Spanish, to c4 for an Italian. Knight c3 for the very lamely named 4 knights. And you can also play d4, which is the Scotch. Lots of different options. And to be honest, when you're preparing, you want to know what the purpose of each one is. Like, what's the idea with d4 in order to play the Scotch? Well, you're having to give up. You're trading off the center pawn, but you don't get one there yourself. But you get a more open game right away. So you do something like this, you get kind of an open game. What I mean by this is pawns have traded, so now pieces are interacting more freely. Let's say you play a move like this, right? I know there are lots of moves, but the idea is that all these pieces are now interacting and the game becomes sharper quicker. Whereas let's take an opening like the Italian, which is very fashionable now. Let's say bishop c4. There are people who play knight f6. There are people who play bishop c5. Let's just go here, and white plays here, just for instance. Now you have a game which is more closed. So action will still happen, but it will probably happen later. And none of these things are inherently good or bad, but you want to know what kind of system you're playing, what the purpose of the objective of your moves are, and what kind of position you're getting. One thing that I think Mishra does very, very well as someone who prepares, it's not just the quality of the prep. Let's face it, everyone has access to the world's strongest player right now. It's just a fact. Everyone can have really good prep. But you want to prepare and get to positions that are both A, sound. You don't want to play a system and then you're lost on move 10. It's just not fun. Don't recommend it. But you also want something that suits how you like to play. In my opinion, at least, Mishra likes to play sharp positions. He's quite good at sharp positions. And for that reason, he chooses systems which, at least at some point, become sharp. They don't necessarily have to become sharp right away, but they will become sharp at some point, and he's particularly good at playing those kind of complicated positions. So while he's preparing what a lot of people prepare, he's trying to play good stuff, he wants something which has promise. Another thing I've noticed with him is he likes to attack. Who doesn't, right? But he particularly likes to attack. So he will choose systems among the systems he can choose which give him the prospect of an attack. Either his opponent's king is going to be slightly weakened, there's some opposite side, maybe something like this. So bearing that in mind, against knight f6, so this is the Petrov. Wow, took me a whole 2 seconds to think of that. I play chess, I promise. So in the Petrov, how does this differ from knight c6? Let's start with that.
Black is offering to trade pawns.
Right, there's a pawn trade that could happen. And what happens when you trade pawns, generally speaking, compared to leaving them on the board?
Open position.
The position will probably become more open. So if you're a fan of more open positions, the Petrov sometimes can be more interesting for you. Whereas if you're playing a system like knight c6, you're more likely to have the center more locked. Once again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. My point is more, you want to decide what kind of position you want to play and choose your openings sort of accordingly. So in this game, Yu Yangyi played knight f6. Keep in mind also that these guys probably play everyone. They've played knight f6, they've played knight c6, maybe not d6, but they will play different types because at this level, it is really important to be unpredictable and learn lots of stuff. I do not recommend most chess players do this. They are able to do it, they are professionals. They spend lots of time doing theory. For most chess players, I do not recommend it, at least at first. You will naturally branch out. I don't recommend playing one system the rest of your life. First of all, it's kind of boring. But it's also, I think a lot of people try to learn too much too quickly. So, all right. I know we are already 2 moves in. We're moving at a really rapid pace. So next we go knight takes e5. This is probably one you guys have seen before. But why does black play the move d6 instead of simply taking the pawn on e4? Usually.
So after knight takes e4, white has this line, queen e2.
So what is the purpose of queen e2?
It's setting up an x-ray against the black king. If
Discovered check.
Now knight c6 wins.
Mm-hmm.
If you're blocking with queen e7, then we take on e4.
Yeah, so this is theory, but I'm going to slow you down because, believe it or not, and this happens a lot, you actually already know so much that you're already going to moves which make less sense. So you're playing the correct moves, of course, but it's important to slow down so people know what's happening, right? Well, why do we have to hang our knight, first of all, right? So queen e7, why can't we just defend the stupid thing?
Right. Probably just d3.
Mm-hmm. Right. So now there's a very important problem. We can't move, of course, because of knight c6. Everyone knows this. What happens if we play bishop out to d6, attacking the knight?
I believe we will take on e4. Then
You are incorrect.
Okay.
It's okay? Try to figure it out. So this, by the way, doing this kind of stuff on your own, without looking at a computer, without telling, is a really great way to improve. You get a feel for the tactics of the position. Right? I love to do this with new openings. I try to figure things out on my own. I try to discover what are the tactics here. Right? What's going on?
Okay, well, we do have knight f7, and if king f7, we can take on e4. That seems good. Is there something better?
That's probably decent, but I would say it's far from best.
You can simply retreat the knight and still keep that attack being on this one.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Just make sure after something like this, you do not try to take this pawn and allow the pin, of course. But you can remove the knight and you're up a piece for not enough compensation. So one thing I would learn from this is that you always want to consider various options. You want to look at the logical moves. Why do these moves not work? before you get to stuff like, why am I playing queen e7? So you can play queen e7 here, so that if the knight moves, you've unpinned your knight. But the drawback is now you can take and grab this pawn, and black cannot take due to the pin. So white ends up a pawn.
Also, development is better.
Maybe slightly, maybe slightly. So that's why this really strange looking queen e7 move exists, with the purpose that after, not king takes, I don't know where that came from, queen takes e4, d6, you have this pin to win the knight back. White usually does this. And these days, believe it or not, it's been discovered that this position after pawn takes knight is actually not so bad for black. This is now a drawing weapon. You want to learn what a drawing weapon is so that as an amateur player, you cannot do it. What is a drawing weapon? And this is one thing you have to be careful. This is why I'm mentioning this with top player games. You have to be very careful. This is something, actually a Wonder who's going to play the US Championship did this a lot. He was one of the ones, he claims he pioneered this. I don't know why he would be proud of this fact, but he did. And the question is, what is a drawing weapon exactly, do you think?
If you are in a critical situation, like you're half a point up and you just need a draw to win a tournament.
Sure, so that's a really good example of when like a lot of people would use a drawing weapon. But the idea of this is that you're not as black when you play like this and you go for this kind of endgame. So this is kind of how it goes. I'm not going to explain every move for now. But basically you get an endgame like this where white just has a slight development advantage. White's just very slightly better. So you asked something like, why would you ever do this if you're black? But the idea is that you're basically playing for two results, essentially. You're like, okay, I'm going to be a little worse, but I can make a draw here. This is something top GMs do sometimes, but I do not recommend it for amateur players. First of all, it's not really fun. You're trying to have fun. Second of all, it's not really a great way to learn, in my opinion, to play systems like this. So you might see it in a top player game, but this is an example where I would not copy strong GMs, not because they don't know what they're doing, but because I don't think it's a good way for most amateur players to try to play. Luckily in this game, this was not done. But now you know why knight takes e4 is not played. When you're examining an opening for the first time, you want to try to figure that stuff out. Why are people not taking on e4? And try to figure it out. This is how you learn tactics. This is how you learn. I like using an opening to learn lots of things, not just one thing. So d6 is played for this reason. So what would happen if the queen were to pin the knight now? Yeah?
Here's one comment about drawing weapons.
Mm-hmm.
If you are playing an opponent who you know wants to win, you might be able to elicit like compromises out of them. For example, I know that Magnus Carlsen is the strongest player in the world. He wants to win. He doesn't want to draw and lose points to a 2700 rating wise. So he will play a move like d3 in the Spanish to avoid a Berlin endgame.
Right. So that's a tricky example. Because first of all, a Berlin endgame by itself is not that drawish. But there are plenty of systems in the Berlin which are a bit drawish. But I would say that in his case also, like for Magnus, he plays positions that are dry very well. So I don't think for someone trying to draw a slightly worse endgame is a great way to play against him. But remember, for most players, I'm talking for most of us, right? We do not have to do this. We are not forced into this position. Preparing drawing weapons, I just don't think is a good idea. Like for most chess players. Like again, if you become like super GM, you can rethink this policy. But for most players, I can tell you that, I'm like, okay, low to mid-range GM, whatever you want to call me, right? But I would not consider playing a drawing weapon for the most part. Unless, even in a must-draw game, I probably would not do it. So it gives you an idea, right? I just don't think it's a good idea for most people. So why not queen e2 here? Or queen e2 is a move, I should say. It's not a bad move, but speaking of drawing weapons, queen e2 is actually a lame way that white tries to get a slightly better endgame. But so how do you have to deal with this pin? This is, again, Petrov tactics. I don't know why I keep forgetting the name of this opening. I think I'm going to blame the light. I'm blaming this light.
Well, it's got to be queen e2.
And also, so you know, I can see you commenting. So, for example, you're welcome, Despo Thoughts. You know, I can see your comments at the various platforms. I just was informed, so if you do have a question, feel free. But why not queen e2?
What do you mean, why not for white?
Sure.
Sort of force black's hand, right? Like he has to go queen e7.
Yep.
And then
So
after-
now the pin is gone. That's why you've played d6. Does that make sense? So of course white can still play like this, and then both sides start yawning and all of this. It's very embarrassing. But basically this is it's actually a funny story. A friend of mine, speaking of drawing weapons, wanted to draw as white because it clinched him something. So he played this way against a good GM. I think it was Kosteniuk actually. And he played by accident queen takes e7 and actually got a slightly worse game as white for no reason. So be careful with this. It's not a good mentality to try to draw for most people. Like most players will just play badly. So I'd say avoid this kind of mentality if you're able to. But okay, knight c3 is the system he chooses. So there are plenty of systems. I would say even if you don't want to play a lot of systems, like exploring how systems look and what the purpose of them is kind of useful when you're learning an opening. So for example, knight c3 has its own particular thing. The main move for a while is this move d4. The idea being that after d5 you play bishop d3. And then there are two systems for black. Usually black either plays bishop d6, castles, castles. And the big thing about positions like this, and if you ever play the white side of a Petrov, this is likely something that is a big thing if you play this line, which is you're trying to undermine this e4 knight. You're trying to claim this knight is a bit misplaced, overextended, and you're trying to undermine it. So you do something like this, and here there are tons of moves. You can play moves like rook e1 or queen c2, attacking the knight directly. I used to like a system where I would take and play knight c3 and try to basically force black to take and then play for initiative with rook b1. There are even ideas of rook b1, rook b5. I'm not going to get into too many details. I liked initiative. What can I say? You know, it's not very fashionable at the moment, but there are different things. Almost all of them are focused on undermining this e4 knight. So this is something I like to do when I check out openings. I like to understand what is the purpose of the moves. Like, why are we doing this? What is the main theme? And I would say the knight on e4 being misplaced is a big theme of these types of positions. Mishra chooses this. So of course black can retreat the knight. But what is the problem with the move knight c3, knight f6, sorry, just in general principle? This is a very playable move, by the way.
You're just wasting a tempo without.
Right, you're giving up a tempo. This is something which I find lots of players forget when they're looking at openings. Who is giving up a tempo and why? Why is knight f6 giving up a tempo and knight takes c3 is not?
Because after knight captures c3, white has to capture back, and it's your turn to play whatever development move you want.
Right, it is now black's turn, whereas if you go back, it is now white's turn, right? It sounds super simple, but this is the reason why knight f6 is a less common move. You want to know why. But it's still a very playable move. So I like thinking in this way, but like let's say you're preparing an opening. You can do the whole chess-based thing. That's what I've done. I was, you know, again, at this point, I teach a lot of chess and I play sometimes, and it's kind of a fun thing for me. But I would say at some point I was a professional player, as in that's what I did. I traveled and played to tournaments. So I would invest in an expensive program. It's a little bit better. For most chess players, you do not have to do this. A site like Lichess gives you all the tools you need. So for example, see this little book? You click on this little book. Make sure it says Masters Database. You don't need to figure out what a bunch of people are doing in bullet. It's not overly important. Although sometimes you get ideas. So notice how knight takes c3 is played almost 5,000 times. Knight f6 is played 753 times. So probably a playable move. You can see all the top games. You do not have to play what all these guys play, by the way. But it's useful to know what people are doing. You'll see that d5 is also a move. If you check that out, it's not very common. It probably means it's bad for some reason. But for example, let's say you're preparing this opening and you're like, knight f6. You don't want to ignore it just because it's played a lot less. If you're preparing this from the white side, I'm sure if Yu Yangyi played this against Mishra, Mishra wouldn't have been like, well, you stumped me, I'm out of book, right? He would know exactly what to do. So after knight f6, I guess one big drawback is you can't develop your bishop yet. You have to still push your pawn. So you get this kind of position. And then notice how here there's a branch between bishop e7 and d5. There are also setups with g6. g6 strikes me as awfully ambitious, but apparently it's a move. So, you would see how the play develops. So for example, bishop e7. Notice how you put the bishop on d3. So I'm guessing that this knight on c3 is maybe a bit misplaced, but there might be times you try to maneuver it to the king side to try to play for initiative. Notice how when you're up a tempo like you are here, you're probably trying to play for initiative. Yeah. So I don't know what you're asking about bishop c4. I would say in these kind of positions, bishop c4 is not as good of a move usually because you're allowing d5, which is a beneficial move with tempo. This is a very common pattern in positions like this. So that's why you're putting the bishop on d3. You're trying to play for initiative, but you do not want to give your opponent a free tempo. So once again, Mishra played this way. Or sorry, Yu Yangyi played this. Takes bishop e7. And now, for example, if you've clicked on the book...
Can we quickly talk about why you could not do b capture?
I'm actually glad you asked, because I forgot to mention this.
More natural towards capture towards the center.
Yeah. And by the way, Joshua, great name, by the way. Knight f6 is a totally fine move. If you like knight f6, it's a little bit more conservative, but it's a completely fine. It's a solid system. I've seen top players play it. It's completely fine. So this is a great question. There are general rules in chess. There are general guidelines that beginners even are taught, or up-and-coming players. But what you have to realize with chess is that almost everything is a guideline. There are almost no rules apart from how to move the pieces. Those are rules. Do not mess with that. But apart from that, everything's really a guideline. Like take towards the center, you hear, right? This is a very common thing. Believe it or not, though, and you'll see, if you click on the book, my goodness, b takes c3 played 10 times. D takes c3 played 4,485 times. I wonder which move is better, right? Or do all these GMs, Fabi, what does he know about openings? Wang Hao. Well, oh no, I'm looking at white players. Carlsen, goodness, Carlsen took with the deep. Does Carlsen not know that you're supposed to take towards the center? That's so weird. So seriously though, this is the kind of thing I like to discover. Why are we not taking with the b pawn? What do you think?
What I see is that it creates more pawn islands. I don't like the endgame that this sets up for white.
Yeah. So,
GMs care about that very much.
Maybe other GMs. So what I would say is that the pawn islands thing, it can matter way, way, way down the road, but usually not for a long time. So I would say the pawn islands thing is less important. It does exist. The concept of pawn islands, by the way, is pawns that are able to defend each other. So this is one pawn island, the a2 pawn. These three are a pawn island. This is a pawn island. We're not going vacationing there. It's just a term they use. And then black has the two pawn islands here. But I would say that in general, right, it's not, like in the endgame it can matter. You can have more weaknesses. But if you start thinking about things like this and basing your decisions on this really early in the game, it's going to mess you up. Kind of like taking towards the center. A thing like that. I want to take towards the center. I don't want to give myself more pawn islands. The more of this stuff is in your head, the harder it will be to make clear decisions. I can just tell you from experience. So I don't think it's the pawn islands thing so much. Oh my goodness, someone's speaking in Spanish to me. Oh no, it's Trika. Trika doesn't actually speak Spanish. Hey though, how's it going? It's been a while. All right. Anyways. Zefcat. Nice. I like how Zefcat can shout out herself. That's pretty awesome.
It was just about
That's really awesome.
to shout myself out.
How's it going, Zefcat and her viewers?
One thing that I know about this position is when white is playing knight c3 and offering up the trade, his intention frequently is to queenside castle.
Yeah.
We have this opposite side castling, like sharp position. If you take with the b pawn, your king will have less security on the queen side.
Yeah, and I got a cool question. How important is creativity in chess? I would say that it's fairly important, but you want to make sure to know the known things first. Like, you want to know the patterns that occur most of the time. Because 90-something% of the time, that's what you're going to do. Once in a while, though, you need a solution that's atypical, and that's where creativity comes in. So it is useful, for sure. But OK, so b takes c3. The main problem, you mentioned the pawns. I would say a lot of it also is development. You still have to develop this c1 bishop. So you'll notice this also in the exchange Roy Lopez, if I can go for a moment. Bishop b5, bishop takes c6. You take with a d pawn, almost always, for the same reason. You just want to develop your bishop. And I would say this is the underrated thing, believe it or not, that people do not appreciate when they try to learn openings, which is that you got to develop all your pieces, so you want to make it as quick as possible, as quick and painless as possible, develop all your pieces, especially in an open position. Remember we talked about this? The Petrov is more open because you're exchanging the pawns. So you want to make sure, especially in open positions, your pieces are getting out as quickly as possible. The main advantage of d takes c3, your bishop can develop easily right away. And that's why people do it in the Spanish as well. You want to get your bishop out early. And there, people are making a bigger sacrifice pawn structure-wise. Here, it's not a big one because we have 4 versus 4, as opposed to black having, say, an e-pawn, and then they have 4 versus 3, and we have the crippled pawns against the 3. Like I said, early in the game, do not worry yourself with this stuff. It is way, way down the road where this will matter, but it's just something you should at least note.
Josh, it also allows you to put your light square bishop on e3.
Yeah, without blocking the pawn.
Without worrying about a d4 move.
Yeah.
Against tempo.
Right, because if you take with the b pawn, you have to then play d4, you have to then play bishop d3, you have to castle. To be honest, it doesn't look awful. But it takes a lot of time. You're not going to develop an initiative. And keep in mind, when you're playing knight c3, to me, you're not playing d4, bishop d3, c4 to undermine the knight. You're trying to play for initiative. So it's something that is fairly important. All right, so black plays bishop e7, trying to castle. This is all very typical. Now, if you click the book, you'll see a bunch of people, most people play bishop e3, but a fair chunk play bishop f4. And these kind of decisions I find are very interesting. So first of all, you should know it isn't like one move is so much better than the other. They're probably of similar quality. Like most things that have been played a bunch, especially in modern games, because everyone has access, like I said, to the world's strongest player, most strong GMs especially are not going to choose a move that is bad. It does exist. There are moves that are subpar, but they're tricky to face. But for the most part, they're not going to. So if you see a bunch of really strong GMs playing a move, and it's played repeatedly, and the computer says it's fine, it's probably fine, right? So it's really a question of taste. So for example, bishop e3 is the normal thing that people do, and then they get castled. They get a position like this. So after bishop f4, what do you think the purpose of bishop f4 is? What would be the advantage of bishop f4? Maybe, but you're probably castling queenside, so it's unlikely you would bring it back to defend.
Maybe black will think twice before playing something like c6 and e5.
Right, you're making it much, much harder for black to play with d5, to play with c6, things like that. Yeah, the control over the d6 square. The e-file might come in handy as well. You guys are making some good points. So I would say this is like a big part of this, right? So you play bishop f4. So something like castles, queen d2. So let's say they play the same exact way, knight d7. So what's funny is if they play the same way Mishra they played in the game, this bishop on f4 is just super annoying because you can't play with c6. Playing with d5 is harder. So it's much, much more difficult to do a lot of your typical ideas. So what people typically do is they play knight here. So what's the annoying thing about this knight on c5? Think about it. How are you getting initiative? How are you developing?
If you go bishop d3, then you just take it.
Right. Your bishop can no longer go to the d3 square where it really wants to go. So believe it or not, white usually just goes back. And this is the kind of thing that looks nonsensical. Like, why would anyone play bishop f4 if they just have to go back to e3? But if you're trying to approach it from an understanding point of view, you'd say, okay, I actually want the knight on c5. It's a little bit of a loose piece after bishop e3. And the idea is that now I provoke the knight here so it can't defend the king side by going to f6, which is what happens in the game. So like I said, these are just differences, but if you're playing from the white perspective, you kind of want to know. You want to know the different options. You want to know what's going on, right? And I would say that you want to go at this kind of slower speed, and a lot of players like to just fast forward through the opening, and that's kind of what I'm trying to hopefully get you to avoid doing. So bishop e3, knight d7, queen d2. So the knight usually goes to f6 to help guard the king side these days. There are other ways to play this position, but this is very typical now. So castles, castles. There's also a path where black can play, and I think you'll see this in this position. Black can play, notice how almost equally popular is this knight c6 move. Queen d2, and then bishop e6. So what black's plan is, they want to castle the same side to make sure that they don't have some kind of kingside attack going. So here, notice there are moves like king b1, h4, a3, all sorts of weird nonsense. But the idea is that, you know, you want to have something in mind for this, which I'm sure Mishra did. But I would say when you're preparing an opening and you have the book out, you want to make sure any move that is played fairly frequently, you check. You make sure you at least know kind of what to do. You don't have to know it 20 moves deep, right? But know at least kind of what the move does and what you're trying to do. As you're preparing an opening, this is something you want to do. And like I said, Lichess, it's a free tool. You can just do this. And believe it or not, you can learn an opening quite effectively this way. So, yeah. So queen d2. So castles, castles. Another move you want to check, and this is another thing you really want to do. A lot of people do not do this, but I actually encourage it, is let's say you're black here, and let's say, so knight f6 was played in the game, which is what most people play. c6 has also been played. But let's turn the book off for a sec. Are there any moves that you're curious about? What would you play as black? Like, what do you think makes a lot of sense, right? So try a move, right?
a6 and taking b5.
Sure. So this is a great moment to try something like this. I see a5 mentioned as well, trying to attack. These are things you want to check. Say, okay, so a6. So don't just turn on the computer. Say, how would I react to this move? Is b5 something I have to worry about that I should stop? Or is it not such a big deal? Should I just continue with my plan? You know? Should I play h4, trying to play bishop d3 and trying to attack that way? Should I just play a waiting move like king b1? Right? And these are kind of the questions, and it's very hard to come up with a firm solution on your own. My idea here would be, okay, is b5 really doing that much? I don't think so. That's the great thing about having this pawn structure, by the way. Your king is going to be very hard to attack when you have all those pawns in front of you, which is a big kind of perk of this system. So am I afraid of b5? Probably not. So does that mean maybe I just develop my bishop to d3? So we could think about that. We could think about h4. We could think about king b1. These are moves that would come to mind. So let's try bishop d3, for example.
So my idea on bishop d3 is the reason we played the Petrov in the first place is because black potentially is like trying to use this as a drawing weapon. After bishop d3, we can have knight e5. It forces the trade of some material. With fewer pieces on the board, white is less likely to create a successful attack.
Sure. So first of all, we have to realize this. Like, for the most part, when amateur players are playing a Petrov, they're not using it as a drawing weapon. They're just playing an opening. It's just an opening. It's not inherently, like, I don't think this line is necessarily drawish at all, right? There are plenty of lines of the Petrov which are. So you don't really want to make assumptions that people are playing it for a particular reason. But I would say that if black can play knight e5 and trade pieces, it's not like, well, I want to win this game, so I don't want to trade pieces. It's like, well, if we trade off a lot of the queens and some other things, my initiative will die down and my position will be worse. Not that you're losing or even like objectively doing horribly, but my position will decrease in quality.
Like black's position.
White's position.
White, that was my intention.
Yeah. That's what you want to focus on more than, well, they're closer to a draw now. So you might decide, well, you know, bishop d3 is kind of annoying because it allows knight e5, which by itself doesn't do as much. Maybe I'll start with h4 and see how it goes, right? So you do these things, and then you have another handy thing, which is this computer. So you can turn on the computer and see if you're right. So let's turn on this computer. So a6, it likes bishop d3. That's interesting. So I wonder what the intention on knight e5 is. Apparently, the intention is you can take and then play this move c4. And this position, it thinks white is significantly better, almost half a pawn. So this is a great moment to kind of reflect, like, wait, why am I better here? What's going on, right? Why am I so much better? The move I thought might be interesting was the move queen e2, because now you're threatening up a discovery. So it appears here that black has the move bishop d6, and after c4 can play queen e7. Aha, we're getting somewhere. Queen e7 against this is pretty annoying. So if I misclick, then this analysis is over. Goodbye, everyone. Where? Oh my gosh, jeez. All right, we're going, yeah. Okay, so back to this a6 thing. So a6, bishop d3. So now we're kind of learning, right? Why c4? A lot of people just go, okay, this and then c4, computer says white's up about half a pawn. All right, we're good. But why c4? Now we know. Can someone tell me the purpose of c4?
B5.
Hmm?
Prevent B5 maybe?
Nope.
But I actually think b5 is almost enhanced by c4. I would almost prefer to just like sacrifice a pawn, maybe a5.
Right, so by the way, after b5, I have no intention of taking your pawn, just so you're aware. This is a good test, though. What are we doing after b5? This is a good question. I know what move I would play, I think, probably. As long as I'm not hanging something. I don't think so. I got to double check a lot these days. Someone mentions the purpose. We'll get to that in a moment.
Bishop e4 looks pretty good.
Attacking this rook, and it looks like we're going to trap it. Because let's say they trade queens there, or we can do it later. It's not a big deal. Whoopsie. Well, that was a fun game. So we're learning why, some of the reasons why this is true. So we're playing c4 so that now bishop d6, we knock it with c5 and laugh in their face because they have to go back. So now queen e2 is coming next move, and black has to solve this. They don't want to put their queen on e8. That looks horrible. So what is black going to do here, right? Let's say maybe a move like f5 would be interesting, right? Let's examine f5. Turns out queen c3, and they have a big problem. We're threatening to move the bishop with tempo. They can't play e4 because we take it. They have a real problem here. Notice how they're already pretty much lost. So this is the kind of thing that I like to examine. Not that a6 is a good move or that you'll ever face it, but that you know some of these patterns. This c4 thing is hard to figure out, right? But it's very important to go, even if the computer really likes something or recommends something, to make sure that you're actually figuring it out. The computer telling you something, you do not learn that much. But if you're able to figure out the purpose of a move, that's where it becomes very powerful. So it's good to be curious when you're examining. Again, it's more painstaking. It takes longer. But in the long term, I think you will learn more about the opening this way. And that's why I don't recommend trying to play every opening, right? Joshua, who of course knows a lot of things, is saying you have to actively engage with the possibilities. That is what I said, only phrased better. So I think this is definitely a good thing to do. All right. So knight f6. Black wants to have the knight over here defending their king side. We play bishop d3, continuing our supposed attack or whatever. Rook e8. So here we have the move rook he1, which if you click the little book, the magic book, everyone on earth plays the move rook he1 for some reason. So I wondered when I was looking up this game, well, why aren't they playing the d rook? We're going to play h4 and knight g5 and start attacking. Why on earth are we playing the h rook? So this is something I examined, right? Okay, what about it, right? So then I saw, and this was something obviously the computer told me that, bishop d7 is good now. Because if we play bishop d4, they can even play c5. And the whole point, imagine if this h rook were on d1. We'd have an amazing position because we'd be targeting this pawn, they'd be in a lot of trouble. Now we're hating that our rook is out of the center. So because black's aiming to play the c5 move a lot, because they have a lot of central ideas, it's very important we keep our rook in the center. So yeah, if you had just said, everyone plays rook he1, cool, that's what I'm going to play, you would have the correct move, but you wouldn't know why you're playing that rook. Because let me tell you, there are plenty of lines where you're going to wonder why you played that rook. So you'll come back to a question like this. Keep in mind also, a lot of the times there's no clear better move, or in this case, I think rook he1 is slightly better. It's not like rook de1 and you're now worse. It's just black's more or less okay. After rook he1, black's still fighting for equality. We're talking minute differences that in most games aren't going to be, in most games, it's not going to be the most significant thing. So, yeah, the way I think of an opening in general, right, is that a lot of people there are a lot of people like tricky openings where they're trying to get their opponent right away. There are people who are trying to just play all the popular stuff. There are people trying to be solid. There are people trying to attack. What you really want to do is make sure your opening is setting you up for success. So at the top level, even the very smallest of edges is what they're looking for, because it's hard to get, first of all. And when those guys have a small edge to work with, I can tell you, unfortunately, firsthand, it can be really annoying to get back in the game against them. It's really difficult to play and get back in the game. So, all right. So the move bishop g4 is played. So notice how that's maybe a drawback of playing the h-rook. All of a sudden, this is a pin. Kind of annoying. Keep in mind also, just so you know how prep goes, there is almost 100% chance both guys are still well in theory. So we're on move 12. Both guys know exactly what they're doing, almost for sure. And that explains Mishra's next move. He plays the move bishop g5, which notice is the most popular move. One thing I wanted to note, by the way, is that if they play bishop d7 now, and we play this bishop d4 move, this is actually a really cool moment. Because now, if they do the same thing I mentioned, right? d6 is weak, the bishop's amazing. So it's an important resource we have, this bishop d4 move. And I was also curious. I'm like, okay, well, what happens if they just move this bishop again? And this is where stuff gets kind of fun. We play a very typical move in these positions, h4. So why are we playing h4 when our rook just left h1? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But the point is that quite often we're supporting our knight. So for example, if queen d7, we have this very cool idea, knight g5. So we're threatening to take and do bad things, so they play h6. And very amusingly, we just play f3. And believe it or not, black is almost dead. And the reason why is they do not have moves. They're out of moves. If they try taking the knight, we get a monstrous attack. And we can just keep building our rooks. Rook h1's coming. Believe it or not, black is completely hosed here.
Just because I think it's interesting, I want to point it out. Just go back one move. If there was like bishop g5, then bishop h7 check, we don't lose our queen.
Yeah, because the bishop hangs. That's a very good thing to point out. But this is the kind of thing that I like to see. Like, why are we doing this? Like, what? So sometimes I just play moves that to me look normal. Of course, queen d7 is a terrible move, right? Like, black's supposed to play h6, and life goes on, and all of this. Like, I think the move here is h6. And then we have c4. And this is another cool idea. Notice how, what's the point of c4, do you think? Another idea I've seen, it's fairly typical, but you want to know, why are we playing c4? What do you think?
Stop things from going to d5.
What do you think the intention here is?
Bishop c3. There's multi-purpose.
Right. So the bishop now hides. We control the d5 square, and this kind of position is fairly pleasant. Again, pleasant means maybe a little better. We're not talking much. But you want to learn these ideas so that when you play the opening, your opponent plays something unfamiliar, you're armed with a bunch of ideas. One thing I would say that I see a lot of amateur players do wrong, which is something you want to be careful of, especially if you don't know the opening too well, is that let's say you know a variation. The problem is that if someone plays something slightly different, I find that amateur players are very prone to just playing the variation anyway, playing the exact same moves. I had a game today from a blitz game, and it's just a blitz game, you know what happens, where I played castles when my opponent expected me to develop a bishop. So they played the move they were intending, bishop b4. Bishop b4 with the intention of checking my king. My king was no longer there, right? So this is a very simple example. It's a blitz game. It happens to everyone. But the point is that it's very obvious in that position bishop b4 isn't good because there's no check and it doesn't do anything. The bishop's misplaced there, right? But I would say that there are less obvious examples than this that happen a lot. So you want to make sure you are not repeating moves you know. This is why when you are preparing, you want to have a lot of ideas at your disposal so that you can choose different ideas based on what your opponent's playing. With the understanding as well that you might have to play some completely new idea you've never played. That's where creativity comes in because they do something completely different. If they randomly start playing a5, b5, b4, probably you have to react in a different way, right? So having a flexible mindset is really, really important. So bishop g4 is played here for that reason. The bishop d7 ideas do not work as well because this bishop d4 idea is effective. So he plays bishop g5 for this reason. This move makes it very annoying for black to rearrange. Stuff like this. So black plays queen d7, which is a very logical move, trying to develop. And this, I would say, is where Mishra, I don't want to say had his novelty, but had his particular idea. So there is a way most people play in this position, which is, and you'll see this in the book, right? The move king b1. By the way, also note there's a move a3. They actually have a similar issue with them. We'll see in a moment. But notice how king b1, the computer will tell you, by the way, king b1 is very slightly the best move. Don't always trust the Lichess computer, but let's just trust it for now. It's usually, at the very least, it's plenty strong enough to analyze, right? So I would say it's at depth 42. It's probably doing okay. Notice how it says king b1 is the best move. That means we should play it, right? Mishra didn't play it. Keep in mind, he has the same computer you guys do. Probably a lot better. And it's probably still telling him to play this move. So the question is, why are we not playing king b1? So this is something I investigate. Man, all these games are drawn. That's not a good sign. Including a Yu Yangyi game.
Well, the evaluation is not necessarily indicative of how complicated the line is. If you're playing this with white and your goal is to give yourself the best possible chance to win, even if king b1 is marginally the best move, if you're not, asking your opponent questions, it may not necessarily be very difficult for black to find good moves as well.
Right. So some moves are more difficult to face. And other things like this will happen where the main line now goes takes, queen here. This is what the computer wants you to do, and go for this endgame. Now, number one, what do you think the odds of winning this endgame against a really strong GM are probably pretty low. It's like, it's barely anything at all. Like, this is like, okay, you have slightly better king, you're not going to lose it. If you're playing a must-draw game, you've done a great job. But you're probably not going to beat a really strong player. So Mishra's idea is not only, I think, a cool idea, but it's practical, it's tricky to face, and it also suits his style. Remember, coming back to that, what was Mishra's style, would you say, in general?
Aggressive.
He's aggressive, he wants to attack, he wants to keep the game like that. So he plays the move h3. So this move gives options. Bishop takes f3, for example, is a totally valid option. But now the game has become more double-edged. White has possibilities to attack. White has the two bishops. Obviously, White's pawn structure has seen better days. But, and this position can lead to all sorts of complications. I was looking at some line with, so first of all, if you try to grab this pawn, you're going to get wrecked by the rooks coming over. And it's a very common pattern. Very rarely can you grab this pawn. So a move like d5 I was looking at, h4. And then apparently black's supposed to play queen d6, I think is what the computer mentioned as the best move. And this is the kind of thing where when I see things like this, I get intrigued because I'm seeing moves that, at least to my mind, are not obvious moves. My opponent's going to have to find those moves. So I like things like that, right? Also note that if your opponent knows the move well and you don't, I'm not saying for sure Yu Yangyi didn't know this move, but I think that it's maybe likely he didn't. He was surprised by it. So then he has to make the decision, man, am I going to go for those takes f3 positions that he knows and I don't? So people start to get nervous. So he plays back, which of course is extremely safe looking and logical. And here, Mishra plays g4. Such a subtle difference. All he did was make it so that the queens don't trade, right? But by the queens not trading, what has he done? Like, what is he, why is that such a useful thing?
The queen is the most powerful piece. He's a good attacker.
Right. So now he has all these attacking possibilities. Add to that the fact that black really has to play h6, because otherwise you're going to play like knight d4 to f5. That's going to get really nasty in a hurry. Knight on f5 usually is bad news. It's pretty good. So h6, he goes back again. I don't know how much is theory, how much is not. I guessed, though, that bishop e3 was still in his knowledge for the main reason that, first of all, h6 is the best move. I'm sure he analyzed it. But also because bishop h4, which is the move my computer wanted at least, leads to knight h7 and more trades. So keep in mind, not only is he playing, I mean, it's not like bishop e3 is so much worse, right? Maybe it's not worse. I don't know. He has access to better computers than I do, whatever. The point is that he's choosing a move to keep pieces on the board because he wants to attack. And his next idea will be to play for g5. Sure enough, after bishop f8, which is a very logical move, he plays rook g1, back to attacking. And the game continued like this, right? Where he's continuing to attack. There were lots of mistakes. There were lots of things that happened in this game. You know, and this is where clearly players were out of book. I think the computer wants to play g6, which is kind of a tricky move. The idea being that you kind of stabilize your position, you try to develop your bishop a bit more. There's a funny variation that goes king b1, and if bishop g7, I take this pawn. And play g5, I was like, okay, computer, whatever you say, buddy. But the basic idea, though, is that it's, you know, a complicated position. You're getting some attack. Yu Yangyi played this. And yeah, and one thing I learned is that now after g5, knight e4, believe it or not, he could have just taken this thing and laughed in his face and played knight d2 and said, yeah, you're not mating me, but you're going to get mated very quickly. But the point is, think about the opening from the point of view of setting up success. Has white succeeded? Regardless of the evaluation, let's say I told you this position is equal. It's obviously not after queen e6, but let's say after g6, black plays accurately. Let's say it's equal. Has white achieved their opening goals, do you think? I think so. They have an attacking position. They have had more knowledge than their opponent a bit. That's always a wonderful thing, I'm sure. They've set up a double-edged position where they are attacking exactly what the type of position that suits his style. And he ended up winning a nice game. I mean, the game is very long and complicated. If this were not just an opening lecture, I would have saved more time for the game. But the fact is that there were lots of mistakes, both of them. Like I told you, queen e6 is a huge mistake. And here, Mishra, after g takes h6, is completely winning. Could I tell you exactly how it works? Not really. This whole knight d2 concept, I'm sure, was underestimated somehow. But even after king b1, even after the position they got, right? They got a position like this. Keeps queens on, of course. Even here, one thing I noticed, I think here the computer was like, yeah, it's about equal. But if I ask myself, who would I rather be? It'd be white. And the reason why is because I am the one attacking. I have this initiative which is not going to die anytime soon. So this is the kind of thing you want to use your openings to do. Number one, start from the ground up. Learn why you're playing the early moves. I mean really early. People assume by early I mean move 8. I often mean move 2. really early. Understand why you're playing this. I'd say, especially if you're closer to starting out, for sure this is important. But even if you're, advanced, you become a very advanced players, I find that I coach really advanced players who forget to do this all the time, and they often don't know some very basic concepts of the opening they're playing. Start from the ground up, learn it slow. Do not try to learn tons of things at once. Really try to learn it the right way. Look at games like this, try to figure out what's going on. Be curious. If there's a move you're curious about, don't just assume it's bad. Oh, a computer says it's bad because of this. Figure out why it's bad. Because it's not so important that you refute the move. It's important you understand what kind of moves are good in this position, what kind of moves are not good. And pick openings that suit your style. I think that's where Mishra is really good. I don't want to say his prep is better than other GMs around his level. I mean, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But what I've noticed he does well is he often gets in positions that suit him. He gets in positions like this where, whether it's good for him or not, he likes playing white in a position like this. So it works out for him. It has worked out. It certainly worked out this event. And we'll see if it works out in US Championship. But yeah, so hopefully that sheds a little light on it. Again, I can't pretend to know how these guys prepare exactly. I never got to this level, but hopefully at least this will help you prepare in your own games a little bit and kind of know what to look for. Any particular questions? All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. And stay tuned. I think Dinesh Boros is coming up next. Who will be? Dinesh is next. He's going to be a lot more entertaining and energetic, so definitely stay. So, all right.